Let's encourage our hosts to be even more hospitable. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Value for Value podcast. My name is Kyrin, host of the Mere Mortals book reviews, and also this one, which is the podcast for digital content creators who want to connect deeper with their audience, to create a community, and also to be able to kind of find a way to monetize in this very crazy ad-driven world that we usually find ourselves in. I'm recording here on the 20th of September, 2023. I usually do a live show, so if you ever feel like tuning in, just check out some of the notes that I'll say at the end, and you can find out when that is. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about the incentives of hosting. Everyone needs to win. So this is definitely going to be a more business-orientated episode. I don't typically go down this realm because I'm more interested in the kind of philosophy, and the putting it into the practice certainly is an important point, but it's the kind of underpinnings which I'm really fascinated with. However, this is going to talk about the hosting companies because they're a really integral part of the podcasting ecosystem. I guess it's possible to have podcasting without them, but it wouldn't be very big. Let's put it that way. Yet there are a couple of niggling problems that we kind of see with the podcasting hosts and how they run their businesses. And in particular, I mentioned right at the start there, the incentives of hosting. What are their incentives? And so I just want to give a quick definition here. So incentives are anything that persuade a person or a company or an entity to alter their behavior in the desired manner. It is emphasized that incentives matter by the basic law of economists and the laws of behavior, which state that the higher incentives amount to greater levels of effort and therefore higher levels of performance. So we go, okay, it's essentially something that makes you do something, and you want it in a good way usually, but you can have bad incentives as well, and this is where you can have misaligned incentives, and this is where we're going to talk about that today. But once again, a misaligned incentive refers to a situation where the goals of different parties involved in a particular situation, such as a firm or a system, are not aligned and may even conflict with each other. So how can there be some misaligned incentives in podcasting hosts, Kyrin? What are you talking about? So I first want to talk about why a podcasting company would shut down. What would be a reason for that? Well, obviously bad business practices and all that sort of thing. But one of the big reasons is because of the models that they try and operate under. So for example, Sounder FM, I don't know if many people have heard of that. They weren't the biggest of the biggest companies, but I'd certainly heard of it. This is myself and Juan. We were looking at moving our host over, back in 2020, and Sounder was an option. We tried them out. We didn't particularly enjoy it, so we ended up going with Buzzsprout instead. But I actually did have a personal tie with them. I had a show which I was not an active podcast anymore, called Reseñas en Spanglish. It was basically book reviews that I did in Spanish, and I had done a whole bunch of episodes of it. I don't know how many, 50 to 100, something like that. And I just wanted to have this there basically just have a show just living and existing, and Sounder was great because they had free hosting. So I was like, oh, okay, awesome. Now there's a problem with this because free is never really free. So there's this really great article that I came across from the Feed Your Brand is the name of this podcast, and it's hosted by Tracy and Tom Hazard. And they actually have a podcasting company called Podetize, and Podetize with a TIZE.com. And they actually had this article, February 2nd, 2023, why podcast hosting companies quit. Well, it's a tongue tie. And what you can do to avoid it. And they're really talking about, hey, exactly the situation I had. I had this Reseñas en Spanglish up. The podcast host company quit. Went out of bit, changed their business model. They still exist, but they don't host podcasts anymore. And I looked at moving it over, and I dilly-dallied around the deadline, and eventually I'd let it lapse, and so that podcast is not up anymore. Although I do still have all the audio files and things like that, so it's not too hard to get it back up. But I just went, this doesn't matter to me that much. It's not that important. However, it would have been nice. Now, the problem that they had was they had a freemium model. And so if you want to go back to the episode 4 of this very podcast where I had free is never free, well, even in the Feed Your Brand, they talk about free isn't always free, which was their version of it. So essentially, what podcasting companies do, these hosts, they try and get as many people in with a kind of free offer. And then as the podcast will grow, as people want to put more episodes in, things like that, that's when they say, hey, look, this is actually costing us money to host this. You need to jump onto one of these other plans, or we have all of these other add-ons, additions, which you can use. Okay, cool. Now, the problem with this is that competition is really tight, and you'll see a picture shortly of just how many podcasting hosts there are, and there's a whole bunch of them. And for example, there's a whole bunch of podcasts as well, and a lot of them are on Anchor. And I guess I wanted to say here, there's like 4 million podcasts roughly, and a lot of them are these kind of shows which people just put up and don't care about, sort of like I had. And so there's actually only a relatively small number of active podcasts, around the 400,000 range. And so all of these companies are trying to get these more active podcasts, usually, although there are others, of course, which still have value and people pay for. But they make their money mostly from these small shows because by definition, most podcasts are small. So when you've got this kind of freemium model, you're kind of having to go after these small shows. And if you just can't get enough of them, go after the small shows and then kind of upsell them onto a new product, because that's how a lot of podcasts start. That's how the mere mortals did. We just jumped with a free one. And eventually we realized, oh, this is really cool. We want to keep continuing this. Okay, we'll start paying for this because we want more ability to upload episodes. We want to have greater functionality, things like this. And if you just don't get that momentum, that's how you end up crashing and burning or not running out of money. And this is what happened to Sounder, for example. The other problem that exists is big bandwidth. You always talk about big pharma, big industry, or big military, things like this. Well, big bandwidth. The problem that a lot of podcast hosts have is they don't want big shows. They actually don't want their customers to really be successful. And you go, okay, well, why? And so there is another great podcast called Podcast Pontifications, hosted by Evo Terra. And he had this episode called Hitting the Limits of Low-Cost Podcast Hosting. At some point, if you're lucky or very strategic, your podcast might become too popular for you to stay on the same low-price hosting plan. Remember, unlimited downloads sounds all fine and good until your popular show starts costing them real money. So yes, this is exactly what happens. Essentially, once you start hitting 10,000 or more downloads, the bandwidth costs just skyrocket. And once again, this is because podcasting, it's kind of this on demand, you can get it whenever you want. But when you release an episode, if you're very popular, everyone's going to listen to that straight away, or 90%, 75% of your audience will hit that episode within the first 24 hours. And so the bandwidth costs, maybe if you could distribute it over a week, it'd be all right if you had a weekly episode, but that's not how this stuff happens. You get absolutely hit. And so this is where I guess a lot of the hosts do is they go, okay, well, once you've got someone adding this much bandwidth, you need to have a chat with them. And this is what Evo Terra was saying, this is where you'll get a message once you start getting really popular. It's like, hey, your show's doing well. It's actually starting to cost us a lot of money. We need to come to a solution. And either this is you start paying more as a kind of flat rate for your host. So, for example, I think we pay $24 a month for the mere mortals with Buzzsprout. If that got really popular, they would maybe start saying, hey, you need to start paying $100. Maybe you need to start paying $200 just to cover our cost. And then another way would be, okay, well, perhaps we can do some sort of ad solution where the way that you'll make money is from ads. And so if we can get a percentage of that, then the better your show goes, the more ads you pay, the more ads are getting played, the more money you're getting from advertisers. We get a cut of that. Everyone's happy, la-di-da-di-da. But there's always, I guess, this, unless you get these things really aligned, this is where you can have the misaligned incentives coming, where the podcast host actually kind of doesn't want you to get popular. They would rather your show stay small and you pay that flat rate, or so small that it doesn't even matter. And so they can offer that free service, and it really, it doesn't hurt them at all. But you just got to think like, man, there's probably something lingering in the back of the mind where it is this misaligned incentives. They don't want you to get better. They don't want you to get more popular. So they might even start doing some things which would make it so that you're not as popular, or they won't advertise your show. They won't do everything that they can to help you out, which is a really funny situation. You'd think like, damn, okay, what's going on here? Is there a way to perhaps solve this? It's not super bad, but it's still, obviously people are writing about these things, so it still obviously is a problem. And this is where we're going to come to, okay, what if we can become more closely linked? And so this is actually something that I've experimented with and is happening on this very show right now as you speak. So Todd Cochran, who is, I think, one of the co-founders or the founder of Blueberry, he made a recent post on the Podcast Index Mastodon, and he was talking about how the shows using the value tag made 0.4 BTC. So this is about 40 million Satoshis, which is 10,000 US from being hosted on Blueberry and using the value tag there, which is pretty cool because, man, that tag it's kind of hidden out of the way. It's called experimental. It's not the easiest thing to use, and yet there's still a bit of money flowing through. And this was and they're able to tell this because they get a 3% split of all of that. So they would get 3% of 10,000 US, which is, if my math is okay, $300. It's not a crazy amount. And that's since the start of 2023. I wanted to actually get a little bit more details on that. And, how many podcasts was that from? Because I bet it would be less than 100 if I had to say. But yeah, so that's still cool. And it'll link up with the stats that I talked about a couple of weeks ago in a second. But you can see, okay, this is an opportunity where the hosts can partake directly in the success of the show. And of course, this is where negotiations can occur. So for example, this very podcast, if you boost in, 3% of it is going to go to Blueberry. If this show gets very, very popular, I'm going to have more people boosting in. That's kind of how the value for value model works. You obviously have to do the ask. You have to create a good show. You have to make sure that people know how they can do it and all of these sorts of things. But, roughly 4% of people will contribute to the show. And once again, check out an episode in a couple of weeks where I'll talk about my own very statistics, and I'll be able to back this up with some actual numbers. But the bigger this show gets, the more that they will earn. So once again, this is where it's like incentives are directly aligned, much like how they can have it with the advertising. And if they're getting a percentage of the advertising split, if they get a percentage of the value split of that coming in, okay, awesome. They can do this. And then, yeah, negotiations can occur. I can say, 3%, that's a lot, Todd. Like, I'm not sure I'm happy with that. And he's like, Kyrin, the costs, man. Costs of doing this, you're getting very popular. We actually need to bump it up to 5%. And I'm like, oh, damn. And this is where the free market comes in. And if I don't like that, I could go to another podcast host or, that sort of deal. This is beautiful. This is how it should all work. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't hosts jump onto this opportunity? You'll hear these arguments elsewhere. Value for value is not a steady income. So the hosts, they need, a steady stream coming in. It uses Bitcoin, which is a scam. Oh my God, can't do that. Oh, it's such small numbers, only 10,000 US over the course of 2023. People won't pay. You have to force them to pay. I think all of these we've kind of been debunked over the course of of the value for value show. They're all fallacies. People won't pay. No, they'll pay. It's just, you just have to ask, and you just have to change your show so that it's easier for it, so that they have the incentives to, so that they get part of the feedback loop, so that they know that they're actually contributing directly and they're having an impact. Such small numbers, go back to 2 episodes ago to episode 48. This is where we saw, a couple of years ago, it was only 60,000 sats flowing through the ecosystem a day. Now it's closer to 1 to 2 million. Where will that be in 2 years' time? That could be another whatever percentage X that is, 150X or something like that. So it's not hard to see, okay, well, it's only maybe 10,000 over the course of 9 months at this very moment. What if that was 100,000 or a million? Okay, well, that's actually going to start making a big difference to these podcasting companies if they can get a split of that. BTC is a scam. I don't want to go into that one. V for V is not steady income. Yeah, sure, that's an argument. And but once again, if this is a podcasting hosting company, if they have 50, 100, 300, 1,000 shows, which they're part of the split off, those shows are going to vary in their amount as well, but it's kind of in the variance that you'll get some stability. So once again, there's an option there. Another option that is possible, but you could be saying, Kyrin, this is all risky. What if my host fails? What if Blueberry just goes out of business? Ye of little faith, do you think I'd forgotten about the first 2 properties that I talked about in episode 40, this being decentralization and being self-sovereign? So this is where we're going to jump into IPFS hosting. And so, first of all, if that's your case, what if my host fails? Just move. It's not too hard. I've all of my shows have been on multiple hosts multiple times. It's a bit of a pain in the ass, but it's not that hard. But on a recent Podcasting 2.0 episode 145, which had Alberto from RSS.com and Cameron, who is the guy who's kind of created IPFS podcasting hosting, they go into this concept of being able to do it in a peer-to-peer manner, of distributing, of having, decentralization of your hosting. So it's not just in this one central location. That episode is super complex. I roughly knew the general idea coming in, but they got into the tech side of things, and they were talking about gateways. They were talking about all this crazy stuff. It's like, this is kind of hard to understand. So here's the basic overview. Instead of having one central point where you upload your audio and it getting absolutely hammered, just like we were talking about with the big bandwidth, you can have multiple providers or peers, each providing a bit. So if you want to think of torrenting or the Pirate Bay, this is how that worked. You would have a movie or a music online. Multiple people would have this online, and if someone wanted to get the episode or that movie or whatever it is, instead of just absolutely hammering one of those people who had it, that person could just provide part of the file, and then someone else could provide part of the file. Think of it like a jigsaw. Everyone's got their little piece. Everyone owns the full thing. They have the full jigsaw, but they just provide a little piece to someone new who wants to get that jigsaw puzzle. And then that way they're not, getting absolutely hammered and having 1,000 people showing up their door, all trying to get their jigsaw puzzle at the same time. And so this is where you can say, okay, your peers can help host your files so that they're not ever offline. If your podcasting host goes down, well, or if one of the peers goes down, that's okay, because there's 50 others, 100 others which are also hosting it. So once again, this is the kind of decentralization, even permissionless, because you can have just multiple people coming onto us, and I'll talk to you about how I'm doing this for this episode very shortly. And so once again, it's this idea, the tech behind it is very, very complex. There's all sorts of crazy things going on with IPFS, which stands for Interplanetary File System or File Storage. I've heard both. And this is that central idea of having multiple files in various locations, and yet if one of them goes down, it's okay because there's others which are backups for it. Now, this is not going to completely replace hosting or anything like that. They still have a central point which they link to, which is, the host, which I have. But if that host goes down, this should theoretically work. I actually, I don't think anyone's tried it out where the main hosting company's gone down. And this is also new. So this is just, if you're interested in these sorts of ideas, here's a little taster for you. So getting onto the kind of peer-to-peer incentives, well, why would someone else host my file? What's in it for them? Because we were just talking about incentives before. They need to have a reason for it, because even though it might be only a little bit of bandwidth, they're still providing bandwidth. That's still costing them money. Why would they do that? And so this is where it's like, okay, value for value incentives kick in. And so if I provide a split, which I've done for this very episode, 5% of this is going to go to the IPFS hosting solution thing that's going on here. And I might do this going forwards. I'm not sure. I want to test it out for this episode. Then whoever helps host this file will get some of the sats as distributed via the magic IPFS system technology. So there's a kind of like technology which is saying, yeah, you provide this piece of the jigsaw puzzle, you provide the end corner, you provide this little bit in the middle, and it all comes together to form a file which someone can download. What if I contribute some sats, 5%, and so that 5% kind of goes into a pool, so each person who is providing a piece of that puzzle, then they get part of the sats for it. Now, it's not going to be huge amounts because 5% of my show and then split that up to another 100 people or something, they're only probably going to get, tiny little bits. But once again, that's compensation for the tiny little bits that they're providing. So you can see, okay, this is maybe where everyone's getting a part of the pie. Everyone needs to win was the kind of subtitle of this episode. And this is where you can see, okay, when incentives work, when everyone has an incentive to do something and they are aligned and not misaligned, this is where you could go, all right, sweet. This is, this is making it work for everyone. Once again, there's all sorts of things behind this. Old files that are getting no downloads in a 48-hour period, they get removed unless they're favorited by someone. You can just see how all of this would come together. There's things in the background which, sure, it could make it difficult, but I more see this as the angel music. Aligned incentives. It's all coming together. As from the Emperor's New Groove, what's his name, Gronk or something. Oh yeah, it's all coming together. So yeah, this is where it's just a way. This is where like a kind of like little business episode of saying the value for value can work for businesses. Once again, this is for digital products. It's not for physical products. I need to see more proof of this working in the real world for a physical product. I know some examples, and I might do an episode on that at some point. But this is definitely one where it's like, okay, this is worth looking out for. If I was a hosting company, I would seriously be looking at doing this, and many of them are. I know RSS.com has this feature as well, Blueberry obviously, and I think all of them will come around at some stage because it is a relatively easy thing to just put in the actual what would you call it, the RSS, the XML file. It's just the podcasters themselves needing to learn about value for value and why they would want to ask their listeners to listen on an app like Fountain and StreamSats, or to boost in, which is hence why I have this show here. All right, beautiful, sweet. Let's go on to the Boostergram Lounge, and I'll do some live chats at the same time. So I have a small live chat here, which is just my Discord, and I can see Juan and Blueberry listening in, so thank you very much for that. And so Juan was asking, is there a predicted path through where technically data storage becomes cheaper and cheaper to allow for bandwidth expansion? Look, I don't actually even know what that means. I'm guessing you're just saying if the bandwidth and data storage becomes cheaper, which tends to happen over time with the internet. You can see how all of this happens. Will will this kind of make this be just a non-entity, a non-issue? Because audio files, they aren't that big. They're usually in the megabytes range. If unless it's like a music one, which can need a bit more. This episode, for example, will probably be somewhere around 40 to 60, I think, for about 45 minutes worth. So this is where you could say, oh well, if everything 10x'd and was the same price, this would become a non-issue. Yeah, potentially. Typically, though, what happens is when people expand their their capacity. So when you get more energy and energy is cheaper, you tend to use more. So there's, if I could make my audio files that much better by just adding more megabytes onto them, even if it was only a tiny little bit, I'd probably do it. And so that's one thing there. One's also asking, could the podcast businesses not by default make podcasters forcibly pay them percent to as they grow? Yeah, sure they can, but once again, this is just because there's so many podcast hosts, this is where forcing people to do things, you could lose your customer pretty easily, because people would just go, I'm just going to go over to this host here, which doesn't have that. This, I think, is just in relation more like a business thing, the industry, because so many people will start a podcast, not know if they really want to do it, not be serious about it, and so they don't want to pay, because it's kind of like you need to start and do it for a while to realize if this is an avenue worth going down, much like we did. Juan is my co-host of the Mere Mortals. It was probably only until we were, 50 to 100 episodes in where we were starting to go like, okay, this is actually something we really enjoy. We can keep doing this. It's probably worthy of looking at how we can make this better for our audience. And to do that, then we need to start paying. So I think that's more an industry thing rather than the actual business itself. If they start trying to force people to pay, it's just not going to work as great. And they might, lose those people who would convert to becoming paying customers if they'd just waited a little bit longer. I don't know. I'm not a podcast host, so I'm just kind of guessing there. But as I mentioned with those couple of articles, and there's links in all the chapter images when if you're listening to this post hand, you'll see that people are obviously highlighting these issues and talking about it. So there must be issues. So yeah, there we go. I'm going to jump on to the Boostergrams here and thank some people who have supported the show.
Welcome to the Value for Value Boostergram Lounge.
As we were saying, 5% of this is going to go to IPFS podcasting hosting. So if you are a node and you want to help support this show and get paid for doing that, favorite this episode and you'll get some sats coming in hopefully from the next week. We're gonna have to rely on very kind people like the people who supported in, and I'll say at the very end how you can support the show. But we've got coming up at the top here the Bearded Tech. He says, thank you for the kind words. This is the guy who I was talking about last week who's creating the blog index. We're still very early days, and anyone who wants to help dive in and create something great with code, ideas, funding, etc. are more than welcome to come join in and help out in Matrix or GitHub. Mash seems like a great idea. The only issue I personally have with it is all the trackers, which is understandable, but what we are trying to build will be 100% self-hosted, not-for-profit, and data broker tracker-free! 1,000 sats sent using Fountain. Thank you very much, my friend. Yeah, look, honestly, when it comes to privacy things, I am so oblivious. I chuck a lot of my stuff out there, so that's not something I really care about or watch too closely. So it's good to know that other people are on top of that and doing that. And yeah, once again, I when I get some time, I'll probably try out Mash someday, but it's lower on the priority list. I see once again Sam Sethi just absolutely blasting my channel here with lots of, it just says received donation message, 19 sats, 39, 58. So he must have been playing around with the amounts because these are streaming amounts. But I did see in this, he did send a message at some point. Where is it? Here we go. Podfans has a Sats-enabled blog with zaps and boosts. Love the idea of also adding splits. We are creating an RSS 2.06 feed and putting it in the podcast index with the medium of blog. Very cool. Podfans, man, what can't you do over there? What can't you do? Yeah, he's coming out with the progressive web app on mobile in, I think it's like about a week's time. So yeah, I'm definitely going to help him out with the testing and things of all of that. That'll be very cool. But Podfans, it's getting stronger. It's getting you can listen live, and so I put up links and stuff for that as well. So very, very cool. I see Chad F coming in here with a row of 3,333 sent using Customatic. He says playing catch up. Thank you very much, Chad F. Catch up all you want. I definitely need to update all of my episodes again. I've made a solid crack, people. The first season is pretty good, apart from some of the chapters. I still need to fix those, but the first season, all the notes, all the links, everything works. I still need to fix up the boosting amounts for season 2. Boosting amounts, the splits for season 2. It's on my to-do list. And another one, an exciting one here, from James Cridlin, the host of Pod News. Also, Sam Sethi's partner in crime over at Pod News. And he said, live boost, 1,111. That's a row of Richards sent using Fountain. Another live one here from Booberry himself, 17,776. Baller using Boost CLI. This is awesome. We're getting like basically every method. Just need a CurioCaster boost and that'll sort it all out. He says, I inadvertently found myself in the hosting game getting a bunch of music uploaded over the past couple of weeks. It's been fun. Snip, snip. A reference to the running with scissors there. Booberry's Boost CLI and his boost spot is actually in my splits as well. So all of these boosts, once I finally get all the live chat and all that stuff working, that'll be a very awesome addition. And once again, just showcasing the splits, showcasing that people are excited about all of these things. The music obviously is really taken off, and I would encourage people to just keep an eye out on that, because I'm going to get Adam. I hope to get Adam on the Mere Mortals perhaps next month to talk about that, because he's been doing it for, close to 2 months now. So I think he'll have some interesting insights about the V4V music. But thank you, everyone. Thank you. Well, obviously, Booberry, thank you for that big boost, man. Much appreciated. That is going to the IPFS. So Chad, if you're also listening, I know you do some hosting of nodes and things like that. If you want to favorite this one, that'd be very, very cool. So that is the Boostergram Lounge. Once again, I didn't order it due to Sam's shenanigans, absolute shenanigans going on there. But thank you very much, everyone, for boosting in. Very, very, very cool. And then Booberry's just got a little thing here showing that the boost what actually works. So awesome, legend, man. You are incredible. Keep those scissors. Just keep them away from your face. Your face is beautiful, man. Don't get too many scars or things like that on there. Okay, let's get to some tips. The podcasting hosts, they need feedback, people. If they don't have a podcast, they almost certainly have a YouTube channel. So I know Buzzsprout has Buzzcast. I know that Blueberry has the new media show. I'm pretty sure I've heard that most of the hosting companies, I believe, have their own podcast. So this is a perfect opportunity for you to help support them and to let them know what you want, because they need to know about these things. If they don't have value for value, if they don't have a split, if they don't have live tag that you want, if they don't have any of the numerous things that you want to play with to provide more value to your audience, they need to know about these things. And so Buzzcast, for example, I supported them. Todd helped me get this very live stream set up when I was with CasterPod. Yassine handheld me through all of that. And by being more connected with them, you do get benefits for yourself. So not only, because look, you're going to say, hey, I want this, I want that. And they're going to go, yeah, that's going to take a bit of time. So Buzzcast, for example, Buzzsprout, they haven't got the live tag. I would 100% be using that, because I use that for the Mere Mortals and the book reviews. I will be using that as of a week or two's time. They haven't updated it yet. They haven't got all that functionality, because they're very much focused on the consumer, on the the UI, the UX of making things run really smoothly. Whereas I'm more in the experimental phase and I just want to stuff. I don't care if it's hard. I don't care if it breaks. I just want to do these things. So yeah, this is where it's like it's worthy of just letting them know, and you get benefits. So OP3 and pod roll, those are the two things that I got added to the mere mortals, and people were talking about that. I heard James Cridland, who boosted in just before, he mentioned that on Pod News. That kind of just extra visibility, extra little functions, extra features. If you go into Pod Fans, you'll see that Pod Roll is still working for my show, which highlights other shows I think are worthy of you checking out. Kind of like a recommendation list within the actual podcast app itself. All of these things help, and so that's just my tip for today. Ultimately, Blueberry got my business because they had these features like the value tag, like being able to go live. The live one was a big one for me. I really wanted to do that for this show. I was looking at moving it onto Buzzsprout, but they didn't have that. And so once again, the podcast host, I'm going to go and spend my money. And I can't remember how much it was. It was probably about 200 and something Australian dollars hosting this for a year on Blueberry. And, not only that, but he's also receiving 3% of everything that's coming in. So, Blueberry is receiving that. So very, very cool. And that's just my tip for today. Reach out to your host, tell them what you want, what you need, and, be willing to share some of your profits, your value with them, because when they get better, you get better. And it's when those incentives are aligned that it really, really takes it to a whole new level. So, and I've just got Blueberry in the chat here saying, live is lit. Taking a show live takes the production to a whole new level. 10 out of 10 would do it again. I can definitely say for this show, it makes me prep. And actually for the mere mortals as well. I think it makes us prep better by doing it live. So there's variations to this. I want to talk at some point about the kind of optimal show for value, how you have to actually change your show a little bit, but that's definitely for another episode. My app and service highlight. This is a worthy reminder that you actually don't need a podcast hosting company. Behind the Schemes, I don't think they used one. This is Blueberry's show. I know Sir Spencer, for example, he has a DMU feed template with comments and notes to help a musician who wants to self-host. So he's got this thing where it's basically, there's Wavelake and there's the music side project. And once again, these are kind of like varying orders of being able to host it yourself. And he's like, look, this is how you can do it. Here's some notes. Anyone can do this. And this is where I somewhat agree and somewhat disagree. I use Casterpod, which was a self-hosting solution. It's doable, even for the tech strugglers like myself. Okay, they use a podcasting company called PodServe, but I'm pretty sure he alters his own RSS feed. So once again, it's kind of like a half thing that he's doing. And that's something that I want to look at in the future as well. But this is where it's like, okay, you can do it yourself. Casterpod is a self-hosting solution. I had DigitalOcean as my servers. I installed their package. I was able to basically get all my stuff uploaded without using what you would call a typical podcasting company. Casterpod actually has added that service as a thing, but you can also do it the open source route if you want, and the self-sovereign route. This is being able to host it yourself. Just remember there are trade-offs in time and pain points for all of this. So, for example, I very humorously locked myself out of my very own feed. So this was for the Value for Value show. And basically I put the lock tag in. I lost my login details. I couldn't log into my own administration dashboard. And with the lock tag, the company's basically, the point of that is to say, I'm not going to ingest this RSS feed and be able to switch host because they put the lock tag on it, which really fucked me over, especially because I had one episode left. It was hilarious. I had one episode left of season 2 and I did that. So I basically had to recreate the whole thing again just to be able to publish that last episode. A good learning point for me, and also a good learning point for you guys at home. If you want to do self-hosting, just be prepared. You got to running with scissors. You got to take some time. Some things are going to be harder. And just like Blueberry's saying, they have a hand-hacked feed that they submit to the index. When things go wrong, that's on him now. It's not on the podcasting host. So it's good to have these aligned incentives. Hosts can do things that I certainly can't. I'm not great with data management. I'm not great with the real finicky side of technology and things like this. It's awesome to have a host for that. But there's trade-offs of like, I don't have all the features that I would like. That's okay, and you just have to keep that in mind as if you want to know more about how to do self-hosting, Sir Spencer's a great resource for that. So if you go onto the podcast index Mastodon, you can find him there. Finally, value for value. Who is 15% of this show going to go to? So obviously, I've got the 5% going to the IPFS podcasting hosting, but I want to give 15% to Kyrin as well. This is a dude who's living by a forest or a woods. If you listen to that podcast, podcasting 2.0 episode, you'll hear there was a bit of debate about whether it was a forest or a woods. And he's just some random dude out in the woods who has created this awesome system. There's got to be so much back-end work. There's got to be so much time spent optimizing, certain niche things, learning how to use IPFS. Like that thing is difficult to understand, let alone build on top of. He's just another unsung hero who does great work that could really change an industry. And it reminds me of this picture that was posted on the podcast index Mastodon. Shout out to Christopher Izine, which shows how RSS is holding up the whole podcasting ecosystem. It's this block which is on the very edge, which is kind of like a Jenga tower. It's the block right at the bottom. If you pulled that out, everything comes crashing down. And so this is where it's like, I want to shout out people who help create things like this, where they're doing something that is another building block, and that could become an integral building block of hosting in the future, of making it more reliant, more distributed, of creating incentives that work for everyone. And so big shout out to Kyrin. Massive work that he's doing. And I'm going to leave it there for today, and just give you some recommendations of the value for value system. Sorry, there's a couple. Before I get into that, there's a couple of last ones here. James Cridlin was mentioning Captivate charges per download, which some podcasters see as a bad thing, but it means they really want to help you grow. And he was an advisor for them once, so he knows deeply about that as well. One also sent me a comment as well. Oh, this was related to the mere mortals. That's all good. Very, very cool to have all of these things available. Value for value. This is a value for value show. Obviously, it is the value for value show. And there's a couple of ways that you can help support the show. Time, sharing the show with someone who is maybe looking at wondering about podcasting hosting, wondering about getting a popular podcast. Why are they charging me more? Why is this happening to me? How can I, become more distributed so that my files don't go offline? And I'm a tech person, or they're a tech person. They love to know about all these things. Please share the show with them. I'd really love to start reaching out to a bit of a greater audience. So really, this is definitely the show where I'm trying to help people understand value for value and the various parts that go into all of these things. Not only the philosophy, but yes, in practice, and the business side of things as well. You could also come join for the live, as James, as Juan, as Blueberry have done. This is very exciting. I love getting these little interactions. Talent. So next week topic, for example, is on open source. Now, I got a recommendation for doing this from Sir Alex Gates months ago, and this topic, as well as others, were suggested by people. And if there is a topic that you would like to know about of value for value, please reach out to me. Let me know, hey, I really want to know how value for value works with physical products. Okay, well, I'll spend more time researching, much like I have done today, to see where does this work. I already know, for example, that churches and music, church music, people will sometimes have CDs, and it's like you just take a CD, anyone can get it. Just give what you think is worth, or what what you can contribute. And this is very much on an ethos of V for V. And I know there's a guy at my local Bitcoin meetup who does it with honey and who also does it with meat and things like this. So it is possible. But, if you've got a topic, please reach out and let me know. And or just resources, things that you think would be interesting to hear about. And then finally, the treasure. There's 3 options available for you at this very moment. You can get a new podcasting app. I mentioned a whole bunch of them in the Boostergrams just then. So people boosted in via Customatic, via Podfans, via Fountain, via the Boost CLI, and other great ones are things like Podcast Guru, of things like Podverse, obviously. Podverse is a massive one, and Curocaster. And I think there's even more, and I'm just forgetting them at the moment. But those are a great whole bunch of options. You're helping support the show. You're helping support Cameron. You're helping support Booberry with his Boost bot. You're helping support the IPFS hosting. All of this is getting distributed to various people and to me, of course, which is very much appreciated. I told you how much my hosting cost for this year, so I'd really love to recoup that at the very least. That would be awesome. So you can do it via there. You can do it directly to me at Kyrin@getalby.com. A slightly riskier route if you want to do it that way, because I don't check these as... I do check it regularly, but it's harder to see because the Alby extension with the incoming, it doesn't show me a full week's worth. It only shows me up to a certain point. So I can't see every single one that's coming in. But that's very much appreciated that you can do it via there as well. Another option is going directly to the Podcasting Index site and boosting in with Alby from there, which will honor all of the splits, which is very, very cool. And then finally, if you go to mereimmortalspodcast.com/support, this one likely won't get read out. The PayPal, I don't check that for these shows, but there is a PayPal option there, and you can boost in via there as well, directly to the Mere Mortal. So lots of different options for you available. If you're in Brisbane, you could also, reach out to me and hand me some cash in person if you want. Buy me a drink. That'd be awesome. That'd be really fun. I'm going to leave it there for today. Thank you very much for everyone who joined live. Thank you very much for everyone who contributed. Thank you very much for everyone who's listening now, later as well. It's awesome to see all of this, and I'm really loving the interactions. It's very heartfelt. I'm glad to know the effort I'm putting in is having some sort of effect and helping out people. So we'll leave it there. As I mentioned, next week's episode is going to be all about open source. And until then, ciao for now. Kyrin out.